My name is Jadelyn, and I'm going to be talking about the cultural appropriation of Chinese culture, particularly the Qipao, also known as the Changsam. So, cultural appropriation, as I define it, is the ignorant adoption of cultural traditions and customs often taken on by dominant cultures or societies from underprivileged cultures or societies. The Qipao, also known as the Changsam, is a traditional Chinese dress most popularly worn by Chinese women in the 1920s and 1930s. It continues to this day to be worn during special occasions, such as by the bride on her wedding day and by upper class socialites today. The form fitting dress traditionally is high necked, and on the side of the skirt is a part way slip up the leg. Overall, it's a very reserved look for Chinese women. The history and significance of the qipao. Today, they are traditionally made of silk and embroidered with the image of a dragon and or phoenix to symbolize good fortune and a harmonious marriage. While they come in a variety of colors, red usually represents luck, prosperity, and happiness, and is almost always chosen for wedding qipaos. After the Qing dynasty was overthrown in 1919, women were not allowed to wear the qipao as they began forced into more traditional gender roles. Eventually, they began to fight towards gender equality and tailored their qipaos to hug and show off their bodies. The then modernized dresses were worn as a form of protest and are still worn regularly to this day as a symbol of sexuality and tradition. Madame Wellington Koo was a Chinese-Indonesian socialite and First Lady of the Republic of China in the early 1920s. She was a role model for feminism and luxury, and so naturally, the modern styles qipaos that she wore in her photo shoots became part of the emblem for success. How it's been appropriated today. One of the more recent and controversial instances of someone culturally appropriating the Chinese custom of the qipao was a high school student in Utah who wore one to her prom, even though she was not of Chinese descent. This enraged the Chinese community and prompted the quote, "My culture is not your prom dress." There are also a lot of instances of celebrities who culturally appropriate the qipao as well, often a more scandalous interpretation of the traditionally reserved garment. This could be considered one of the reasons why some girls follow their footsteps in appropriating a sexualized version of the dress as a Halloween costume. And in the background is a celebrity, Nicki Minaj, wearing a sexualized version in one of her concerts. And she used Chinese women in the background to validate her aesthetic. On the left is an example of a sexy version of the qipao that women would wear to Halloween parties, even though it's a traditionally reserved and significant garment. And on the right is celebrity Emma Watson culturally appropriating the garment on a red carpet as a look. Cultural appreciation, as I define it, is actively and sincerely educating yourself about the significance, traditions, and history of the culture. It is understanding, honoring, and celebrating the customs to broaden one's intercultural knowledge. An example of this is in 2015 when the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute put on an exhibition called China Through the Looking Glass. It celebrated the influence of Chinese culture in fashion. Showcased in the museum were authentic pieces from the Qing dynasty, as well as contribution from designers such as Tom Ford, John Galliano, and Ralph Lauren. On display were also sexualized versions of the qipao that, quote, perpetuate the stereotype that Chinese women are exotic, subservient sluts, as described by Fania Suhu for Fashionista after the Met Gala. And on the right are examples of some of the dresses that were showcased in the exhibit. These are my references. Thank you for listening.